Hey, and a hey, everybody. This is Dan coming to you somewhat alive from Japan. And you know what time it is? It's that time. Well, it's that time for me to go to bed. No, it's not that time yet. That's going to be in like 3 hours at like 3 a.m., which is when it usually is time for me to go to bed. But right now, right this second, we have another exciting episode of the mainstream for you. And remember, the mainstream is where we talk about real world adoption of RWAs, what it means for for the mainstream, right? So, because we're going to get out of our, Web3 bubble and we're going to go out into the world and we're going to show everybody how things are done. And we're going to be all like, looking for, not looking for problems with a solution that we made. We're going to look for we're going to get problems, we're going to make solutions for them, all that stuff, right? Well, that's what this is all about. And this is why I'm also super excited to have our guest today. So our guest today is none other than Joshua Stone. And I just got to say, man, that really is a pretty cool name. It's, I don't know, it's very it's very action star. It's just action. And you are an action star of the Cardano space. So you're one of the peeps behind the Book.io and Stuff.io. And that is some pretty cool stuff. And you got some nice books. And that's my dad humor right there. So say hi to everybody. Josh, great to have you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I do my own stunts too, so yeah, not really an action hero, but try to beat
Just
my
go with
kids.
it.
So
Just
I
go
just
with
go
it.
with it.
Just go with it. Just go. Come on. It's okay. Just let it flow. It's okay. It's okay.
Uh,
He does his own stunts and his own arts and crafts.
True.
And he makes a mean gelato. I don't know. Anyway, listen. We can we can figure this out later. Now, look, everybody. I mean, look, unless people live living under a rock in the Cardano ecosystem, they know about Book.io, right? They know about Stuff.io. You guys had some great successes in the ecosystem. Actually, I know it wasn't that recent, but actually the last space I remember listening to was with David Duchovny, and
Yeah.
you did a book by him. Yeah, actually, I don't know, David Duchovny is one of those guys that is just he was around in my youth, and he's kind of like was like part of my you know like uh surroundings.
Yep.
So whenever I see David Duchovny, I'm like, oh yeah, Mulder. I mean, I know it's like
Yeah.
that you don't want to be the guy, but some guys are okay with that. It's like, oh, I played the
Eh,
psychotic character and everybody calls me that, whatever. Some people get triggered by it, but that was a really cool space, and I mean, he's a very interesting guy, and it was just really cool that you guys got to publish his book, one of many, one of many.
yeah.
So
Very creative guy. Very creative guy.
yeah, totally. And I did some reading on him. I mean, he's had some, he's had a pretty cool career,
Yeah.
and he did a bunch of stuff. I mean, yeah. I mean, aside from uh uh the X-Files, of course,
X-Files. Yeah.
being
Yep.
being a teenager in the 90s, and well, I guess not in part of the 90s. I would also watch him in that wonderful Showtime series Red Shoe Diaries,
Oh yeah.
which
Yeah.
was which came on
I
at
thought it
like
was funny. He actually has a band too. Like he's got he plays guitar and he's in a band too.
yeah, totally. So listen, we can talk about David Duchovny, well, for a while. I don't know if that sounds weird or not, but anyway, let's talk about you. So listen, just okay. Tell me a little bit about yourself, because you are, Joshua Stone, very it sounds very very Machiavellian to me, very just tell me about yourself. I don't really know much about yourself, so just tell us about yourself. Um, tell us about
Yeah, for
yourself.
sure. Yeah, definitely. I'll give you kind of the brief background. My growing up, my dad had actually gone to school for electronics engineering, so I grew up around computers at like a very early age. I think I got my first Tandy computer in like, I don't know, 1982 or 1983, something like that.
And 64? Was it 64?
I don't remember what it was. It had the big amber screen, and all you could really run on it was basic and DOS, and that was pretty much it. But I think that I kind of, I was just fascinated by just kind of cutting edge ideas like that. So when I ended up going to college, I enrolled in a new program they started, which they called multimedia technology, which was sort of a bucket for everything that didn't really have a bucket. So at that time, the big thing was, I started in 1997 at Oklahoma State, and at that time the big deal was CD-ROMs, right? And I was like, oh man, I want to create CD-ROMs, and I just thought that was like the coolest thing. And so at that time, there's just so many things changing so quickly. When I graduated, I took a job in Dallas at a .com, and they had synced up with a movie company here, Cinemark, and they were building kind of that infrastructure for online ticketing. So I got to work on this really large project, which was to launch a site called Fandango.com. And it was kind of funny because it was at the time when people were still very much afraid of putting their credit card online. And so I've always found like a lot of my career, I've kind of been like right at the very kind of forefront of stuff, and that's what sort of fascinates me too. Which can also be a challenge because it's sometimes you're too early, and I think I've done I've created a lot of different startups. But, over time I ended up I left that .com. I worked at a couple agencies, ended up leading the interactive marketing group for AT&T for a while at an Omnicom agency. And then I got recruited by hotels.com, and I led their product design team for a couple years, and got real fascinated with just kind of the user experience kind of product side of it. And really, while I had done engineering kind of in the past, like I think my focus shifted more towards the strategic and business side of like how we can create these products to solve some sort of business solution, and then work with engineering to accomplish that. And then I got really fascinated with just startups. I got involved with a social media startup, and this was when MySpace was still bigger than Facebook. And learned a ton of stuff there. Ended up selling that company to a media conglomerate. And then around 2009, kind of early 2010, started an ebook company. And this was before, and basically the whole premise really was, I had Kindle was still a separate device, and I thought, that we should have a device agnostic platform for books. And so we built kind of the very first platform for ebooks that live solely on mobile and on desktop. And so ended up growing that company up, sold it to a private equity company, and then during the course of that, really kind of realized this kind of core issue that we were trying to solve, and then came back to that in 2020, and then 2021 really like formalized and realized how we could create like a decentralized DRM that would really change media. And so like I've always kind of been like just right at the kind of forefront. Like a lot of times I'll say too, like the cutting edge can be a lonely place because there's nobody really out here, right? So as much as we and I think in all these kind of stages and evolution of the internet too, it's like it's fun and exciting to kind of be at the front. It's also scary sometimes and unknown because you're creating stuff that nobody's
Oh
done
yeah,
before.
absolutely.
But it's
Yeah.
super fun.
No, absolutely. You talked about being in the .com boom, and then I mean, I guess we're around the same age, so we kind of had the same. We're in the space around the same time, so you remember that whole thing, right? Where
Oh
it's
yeah.
basically it was this like cultural evolution of the internet, right?
Hmm.
And back in late 90s, 98, 99, 2000, 2001, that's when we tried new things. We
Yep.
experimented, we did these things. I mean, most of the experiments kind of led to failures, like
Yeah.
like a pets.com type of thing. But I remember there was quite a bit of experimentation with ownership, right? So and I'm sure you remember the Napster fiasco. Well,
Oh yeah.
I mean, speaking of which, I got my Metallica T-shirt. Maybe some of you are too young to remember, or just too young for it. Period. But back in what was it, like 2000?
And they were
2000,
instrumental in the suing everybody.
yeah,
They
2001 or
led the way.
something like that.
Lars did, yeah.
Yeah, 2001 or something like that. I mean, look, you know what? I love Metallica, but Lars is kind of starts with a D and ends with an oosh. Uh, I mean, but I think Metallica fans are all aware of this. Nobody
Oh
is
yeah.
like, no man, don't touch Lars. He's the most heavenless person in the world. It's like I love Metallica, but he really is kind of. Anyway, we're not going to get into that. But really, that period was really interesting, right? Because we started, and you said CD-ROMs. As soon as you said CD-ROMs, remember the whole race. Oh, I got the 2X, I got the 6X CD-ROM.
Oh yeah.
My what was it? The Pentium, no, it was like, I remember the first one was the 486 DX50.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Yeah, the 486 DX50 with the with the 4X and the 6X CD-ROM, and then the Pentiums came out, and only the rich kids could afford Pentiums. I was working with Cyrix and AMD chips, but still, that was like the discovery phase, right?
It's a
Then,
big deal. Yeah.
yeah. So at that point, I remember, we still weren't in the whole MP3 thing, but we were in this like sort of like purgatory between the two. So I remember actually making CDs from MP3s because I didn't have an
Tons of
MP3
them.
player. Yeah, and you had the Winamp conversion, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
it was a lot of this was about ownership, right? So
100%.
I mean,
Yeah.
the bottom line of a lot of that whole revolution was about media ownership.
Yep.
And music ownership, who really owns the rights, who really owns the plays, how what are you supposed to do? It was kind of a I remember it was I'm a fan of the movie Social Network for for obvious
Mm-hmm.
reasons. It's a good movie. And I remember Justin Timberlake, was playing what's his name, Sean Parker, in that.
Yep.
Yeah, he said, when he was talking to the other guy, he's like, yeah, but is the other guy like, yeah, but you failed, you got sued. It's like, yeah, and hey, do you want to go and buy Sam Goody? It did change, right? So where am I getting with this? Where what I'm trying to get to here is that you, like you said, you're on the forefront, on the bleeding edge of the bleeding edge, not just the leading edge, but the bleeding edge of these media ownership, like things, and these tug of wars between legacy industry, new industry, which is sort of like in their hippie days, like, screw you guys, screw your ownership bullshit. But it's like you can't do that either.
No.
So what brought you to well, first of all, into this whole, I mean, you're obviously interested in ownership, right? That is why you have book.io. It's all about really, and to tell you the truth, I kind of, for a little while, and actually some of my friends they can attest to this. At first I was kind of like, okay, so book.io, I mean, I like those guys, but like, what's the big deal? Like, okay, I mean, I can get books on Kindle or whatever, what's the big deal? What's like, but then I got it, it's like, yeah, it's ownership, right? So you own the material, and I mean, it's just it connects to everything else. So what made you really kind of, focus on that? And so the follow-up to that, I mean, why blockchain? I mean, is it really needed? Do you really need blockchain tech for promotion and securement of ownership of these materials? And really, what does it do? I mean, what is the value add here? So I just wanted you to kind of spill the beans for everybody so that it's very clear, because it's clear for me now, but it took me a while to get there. I was like, okay. Oh, okay, I got it now. So please go ahead.
No, for sure. So, and I think what's kind of funny in that too, like at this last Rare Evo, I met quite a few people that actually thought that book.io was just like an NFT project of people that really liked book cover art, and that there wasn't really anything. They just thought it was a PFP project, and I thought that was kind of funny. And so I think what really occurred to me, which is sort of an interesting story, when we did our last book company, I was unaware. I think societally, like, everybody is sort of unaware of the idea that we don't own our digital media, that we actually buy a license. And so when we had launched the last book platform, I think when we actually went live with that app, I think it was maybe like 2011 or somewhere in there. And what we did was which would be completely illegal now, we allowed you to, from our app, you could log into your Amazon account, which basically people were just giving us their user ID and their password to their Amazon account. We would log into their account. We would scrape all of their books on their Kindle, and then we would repopulate those because we were working with all the same publishers, so we had all the source files. So we could basically book match and say, hey, if you bought this book on Kindle but you want to read it on our app because we have mobile apps, and you don't want to take your Kindle device with you, then you can just log in and scrape them, and now you have your books over here. And I think it was still early on in the book cycle of what digital licensing was, which really all that digital licensing stuff came in as a result of like Lars and Metallica and all the Napster stuff, because all of the the labels and the studios and everybody was freaking out because they had lost control of all of that. And so they obviously got sued, all those things got shut down, and file sharing just kind of died. And everybody, all consumers just kind of went along with this, like, oh, I guess we buy stuff, I subscribe to Spotify, or I buy things on Prime, or I buy them from Apple, or, iTunes, or whatever at the time. And so I think going through that and seeing that happen, like, once we added this to our app and people could log in and get their books, Amazon couldn't directly do anything to us to stop us from doing that. So they went and put pressure on the publishers to stop that. And what we really learned was, like, oh, we don't actually own these things. And the deeper we dug into the licensing side, I think the thing that became more apparent was, this idea that even though we think that we buy this, we haven't bought anything. Nobody owns any digital media. Like, everything is through this digital licensing that was basically put in place, and nobody really thought real long term about it, because now we're seeing, like, licenses start to expire, because when a lot of that was enacted, it was under a 20-year licensing clause. So we've seen things start to disappear. So it's probably, like, really maybe 2015 or so when I'd been kind of in the periphery. Like, I read the original, white paper when it came out, like, pretty quickly, right after when it came out on the Bitcoin side. And over time, like, I have some funny stories too, which is not for now, but I had talked to different engineers about, hey, we should start to mine this, and then got pushback from them when it was, like, $50, and it was like, it'll never, cover the cost of the electricity, like those types of things. So over time, like, as it became, as I sort of understood it more, I realized, like, hey, the future of media is going to be blockchain based, and everything that we've done is sort of this kind of first wave of the internet, of everything that we've created. But when I really sort of started to understand decentralization and what blockchain enabled, it was like, oh, this is a way to, like, extract this out of a digital licensing model into a digital ownership. And it was really, it was quite a revelation to me of, like, we need to reconstruct a lot of what had been done, and that we need to move into, which I know it's called Web3, but to me it's like really like a whole second wave of, like, how all this technology will need to be reconstructed, and at the core of that being, blockchain and decentralization, just to make things more secure and more transportable. Because it basically gets us back to the Napster days of the file sharing, of where I could send you a book or a movie or music, and I could share something with you, but it protects the DRM, so the creator and Metallica and Lars are not pissed off that their files being copied an unlimited amount of times. And if I resell it to you, then they're picking up a secondary royalty. So it's really the best of both worlds, from a consumer side and the creator side.
Yeah, and so this is actually really brings me nicely into what I wanted to talk to you next. Again, I keep telling people this story all the time, and I'll just say it again now. One of my first thoughts when I was introduced to Cardano and Charles and the team back in early 2016 was, so how do you guys make money? Like, okay, it's open source. Okay, so it's not SAS. How do you make money? So I mean, I go to Universal Studios. I can't see how they not make money. Like everything over there is about you even pay to get in, and then inside it's like, oh, you got some rides, but most of it is store. So like literally there is no, you see how those guys make money.
Yeah.
Uh Josh, how do you make money? I mean, how does Book.io make money? If you don't mind telling us.
No, it's a good question. So, um, two parts to that. One, we work basically just like any digital retailer. So, and there some of the way that the splits work out are federally regulated in the United States. So, generally, what happens as a retailer is we take 30% of all retail sales. So, I think the thing that really helped us get through the bear market, and I feel like a lot of kind of going back to the .com side, right? Like a lot of those things in the early .com did kind of crash and burn, but then what came out of that, right, were these really, in the kind of second wave of that with, the Amazons and the eBays and the things that like really fulfilled an actual need. Like it really, it was an empowering time for them, and they, in a refinement time, right? So with us, I think the thing that is unique is that we basically have an unlimited supply of an endless amount of products to sell, and an unlimited amount of creators who want to sell them. There's no way right now, really, unless you want to go to OnlyFans and sell videos. A YouTube creator can't really sell anything. You could put a podcast out, right? You can do episodes like you're doing, but there's not a real good mechanism. There's no trackable way outside of just giving out a source file and letting it run wild. And then there's no way to monetize it, right? So with us, like we have, a built-in way where we're creating a platform, and that's how we're distributing it. So we have a product, supply. And so we looked at it very much as, more of a traditional, I'd almost say like a web 2.5 type of business where it's like, how do we use, a blockchain and decentralization, all these tools as infrastructure layer, but then still service like an actual product and have a real market fit for consumers to buy something.
Oh, what do you know? An advertisement for a book just popped up. Book.io. Hey, there it is. All right. Well, yeah. Well, first of all, I gotta say, I mean, you guys do have some really cool covers. I like your covers.
Thank you.
Yeah. So you got some of these titles minting now or being recent releases, and okay. So we spoke about just generally, how you make money, but it's more than that, right? It's more just kind of like we sell you stuff, you pay us money, you get stuff. Well,
Yeah.
kind of, but not really. Not totally. So part of your mission, right, is empowering creators. And I'll tell you, I mean, I can't say that I was like anywhere near like successful. Like, well, I mean, I kind of was successful-ish for like literally super short amount of time in California in the filmmaking business. Mostly because I just had the skills that most people didn't have, like editing, and I had the equipment. I mean, it was
Yeah.
basically to boil down to that. It's like I had the
Yep.
equipment that took an investment.
Yep.
Well, just that alone raises your stock. Plus, if you're pretty damn good at the whole cutting and pasting stuff, well, that also raises your stock because most like 80% of all people don't know how to do that, even though it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
But one of the things that really, and like I said, I didn't get up into like the top levels of the studios, tearing me apart, trying to get me to do stuff, and then I just kind of walked away. I'm not going to say that I did that. I was very small time. I had my own studio for a little bit. I did a few independent projects. I did some, I did like random editing projects. A lot of it was like, industrials and things like that. So very much just a job, right?
Yeah.
A creative, but a job. But I'll tell you, that industry, especially in LA, and many can attest to this, and you see this all the time, it will just suffocate any true pure sense of creativity you have in you if you really see how disgusting it is, how
Yeah.
people are being taken advantage of. how people are being manipulated, how people are being deprived of their morals so that they can get ahead. It's so just, I don't know, it's disgusting,
Yeah.
because there
Yeah.
is talent there, but it dies because of this super toxic paradigm that exists there, where content creators, where authors, where filmmakers, where actors, uh, and everybody in between just get taken advantage of and just get the life energy sucked out of them.
Yeah.
And this doesn't just happen in the film business. This happens in the music business. This happens in publishing as well.
Yeah.
And so yours is a project that is really kind of, turning the page on that and really helping to make sure that creators, that writers, that authors are accommodated. Now, what I would like to know is, how do you support them, right? How what you do is different? How is publishing with Book.io different than just going to a regular publisher and trying to do that? And like I said, I actually had a former XXXX. Hope my wife isn't watching this, because she always gets kind of jealous when I talk about my ex-girlfriends. But an ex from a long time ago, she actually tried to get a book published. So I kind of saw
Yeah.
somebody go through that, and it was not pleasant. It was just a lot of work and just
Yeah.
a lot of like slaps in the face. What do you do? Again, what do you do that is different from that, that really helps to make sure the creator is treated fairly?
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a good question, and it is a big issue. I think specifically too, like you mentioned, California. California is very, very interesting because they just signed a law that will go into effect January 1st that makes it illegal for any digital retailer to put the word buy or purchase on any digital media. So I think at an industry level, like that's gonna change things for the consumers, the way that we see things, right? So if I go to Apple TV or Amazon Prime, and there will no longer be a buy button. It will say something like purchase a license, or
Fiscal
something to that effect, right?
acquisition.
Yeah.
Fiscal
um,
fiscal acquisition.
which is just is crazy, but I think it is systemic of what has, because if you rewind back to the 90s when physical media was booming, it was a different time, right? Creators and artists like were empowered; they were making money on their actual art. And now we've gotten into this cycle where even like those smaller movie studios that you mentioned, like it's really difficult for a small studio to make money. It's basically impossible for a new music artist to make any money. And now if you have less than a thousand streams on Spotify, doesn't pay you anything, right? So I think what has happened is we've commoditized media to the point where we've devalued all media, and you can only then make money around the periphery of that. So it's almost like the actual art itself becomes this total loss leader, and effectively completely screws the creator. So unless you're at the highest tip top, you're Taylor Swift, you're not really making that much money on royalties. If you're not Stephen King, you're not making that much on a book. Like I just talked to a guy in New York recently. He's done a couple best-selling books. His last advance for his newest book was $1,000, which is crazy. I mean, it's literally like, and outside of that, like he's probably not going to sell that many books. And he's a very accomplished, like writes for the New York Times, like all kinds of stuff. So I think what's happened is we've kind of over the last 20 years of just digital licensing, like it's slowly like pushed everything down to the point where we've devalued content to basically next to zero cost. We as consumers haven't really had any sort of choice in that matter. And so I think something like what we're doing and reintroducing the idea of, hey, what if there's a finite supply? Because the thing with digital licensing is it basically created just an unlimited supply. And so if we just go back to the basics of law of supply and demand, well, if there's an infinite supply, then price collapses. And if we get that back in balance and we say, hey, maybe there is only 10,000 copies of this, maybe there is only 100,000 of this new album by a certain artist. Like now we're able to do a better job of even what happened back in the 90s when it was things were just blowing up. because we were paying for that media, and because we actually paid for that media, it produced more income, so that industry had more of a margin, so things weren't so tight and weren't so terrible, and artists were getting paid. And we want, we very much like our stance kind of at the company is we want creators to get paid. We want them to have resources so that they can create more art and create more stuff, so that's the stuff we enjoy. That leads to a better society. We shouldn't be trying to like take and extract from those creators and force them down a path where now everything's become homogenized. It has to fit into all these boxes, and you see that a lot, especially on the music side of just artists are no longer wanting to create full albums because they know the only thing that gets played is one single. So then they just release one single, once or twice a month, and try to get their stream count high, right? And nobody's concerned about the actual art side or helping the creator convey whatever that experience is they want to sell, that us as fans are happy to buy. Like, I want to support the artists. I don't have a way to support artists that I like. I'd have to listen to them for hundreds of years on Spotify for them to equal what it costs, for a concert ticket, which is why we go to concerts, because we want to support them. But like, and I collect vinyl because I'm a nerd, but most people don't. So there's not really a real way for a creator to get paid.
I get part of my vinyl collection back there actually with my direct drive player. So you're in good company here.
Nice.
I actually it reminds me of again of being kind of churning in that industry and looking at all these independent movies. And this is back in was it like 2006, 2007, 2008. And I mean, you would get like $500,000 for an indie movie was this amazing. Oh my God, you got $500,000 for an indie movie. Yeah. And it sounds, to some it sounds like, oh, that's actually a lot of money. And I mean, it is, but it isn't. I mean, think about this. For an indie movie, you still need like a 20-person crew.
Yeah.
Okay. For at least 4 to 6 weeks. Maybe if you're lucky, 3 to 4 weeks, if you can actually shoot in a contained environment, right? Because that will a lot of times decrease your costs if you're shooting in a contained environment versus actually on location. If you're shooting on location, you got your licenses, you got your leasing fees, you got your you got your union fees and like all this stuff. I mean, just to get fire and police licensing. Quick. It's like back then it was like $3,000, like $3,000 just for that. $3,000 to $5,000 for 1 day of shooting just to be able to shoot. And then you need to bring in all your camera equipment. You have to set things up. You have to set up. I mean, it's a huge ordeal. And in the end, I mean, really, I mean, there were some movies that like once in a while you have this unicorn. It's like, oh, they just spent like $10,000 to make this movie and it went huge, or they spent $50,000 or $150,000. They call it micro budgets. And the problem with all of that is that really, I mean, regardless of even if you had that unicorn, right, the unicorn would still have to be kind of discovered, right? So you still need to have a distribution channel to pick it up. You want it to have your Miramaxes or Lionsgates or, Fox Searchlights or whoever picks up, whoever does micro and small budget acquisitions to pick it up. And even then that wasn't a done deal. Even then you haven't struck gold because they could shelf it. They could just give you some bullshit fee, get you sign a contract. And if you're, if you haven't been working for like 2 years, somebody gives you like $20,000 in cash and say, here's $20,000. We'll put it in the shelf. We'll produce it in like 3 years. But in their contract, it says like, 3 months to like 20 years from now. And they only did that because they have another movie that is kind of like that they want to put out first. So basically, like, this thing that you did, really, you don't, you in the end, maybe you'll break even. And so that's, that was really the reality of things. And still, up until very recently, as you were saying, it was the reality because you could make this amazing thing. I mean, really, to shoot, if you really are shooting, not in Hollywood, not in Los Angeles, but somewhere where that's more, like, for example, there were a lot of production coming to Austin back in the early 2000s because Austin was actually very, very much film friendly. Like, I actually had the commissioner film commissioner of Austin on the phone. He gave me his like home number. He says, "Oh yeah,
funny.
yeah, come on down. We'll take care of you. We'll give you this
Yeah.
space for free, that space for free." So actually, if you really look at it, it doesn't. What costs is the logistics of it that
Yeah.
actually have to do with the bureaucracy. The actual shoot itself, if you're shooting an indie that doesn't involve too much like stunts or special effects, can actually be pretty cost effective. I mean, I shot really nice indies, really good quality stuff for like $20,000.
Yep.
It was like $30,000. And in the end, the problem is that distribution channel, right?
Yep.
And that's what you're
Yep.
talking about. We're talking about distribution, and we're talking about giving ways of distribution, and kind of like, you make this thing, and in the end, nobody sees it because all the distribution channels have been suffocated by the big boys,
Yeah.
right? And that's what I'm talking about, like 10 years ago, even maybe like 6-7 years ago. But now you have something like what you have, right? So you have this decentralized ownership community, right? You have this decentralized community, like say the Cardano community, which is in the millions, right? And plus you already branched out to other blockchain communities that can consume the content. And this is really, really good because you really are, in a way, just directly connecting to these people. Now, my next question I'm kind of trying to get to here is, how do you empower these people, right? How do you get them to understand that, yeah, okay, you 2 million people that I have access to now, right? I can actually directly provide this content for you. I have the content creators right here. They're working with us directly, right? This is sourced. You can audit this. You can see that, nobody's being screwed over. Everything is transparent. Why should I care as a Cardano person? Why should I care? Why do they care? So explain that to us. How is that better than traditional ways?
Yeah. Yeah, lots of thoughts there, probably on both sides. From the even kind of going, picking on the example you said about spending $20,000 or $30,000 to create a film. Like right now, it's very difficult to monetize that if you effectively right now what you have to do is you've got to shop it around to streaming services, and you're hopeful that maybe a Netflix or somebody wants to do a deal. You're hoping basically to recoup your costs. You're not going to make any money on it, right? So I think what's interesting about what we're doing is, in a lot of ways, and how we talk to labels and studios about it is, I think that for a long time now, social media has kind of been relegated to this sort of kind of sideshow thing, particularly like definitely in the music side, where they're not actually making any money from the social media side of it. So social media effect right now exists in order to just push people to go to that streaming thing, right? So if you're a small studio or a small artist, you're putting stuff on social media, you're building a following, you have people that are fans, and basically you're using that channel to push them to a streaming thing where you don't really make a whole lot of money. And we're basically saying like, hey, we should monetize that. We should monetize those fans in a healthy way for that creator. So then if you're spending, $20,000 or $30,000 to produce a film, you could say, hey, if we have 10, 20, 30,000 followers, we could sell just 1,000 of those at maybe 20, $30 a piece, and we immediately recuperated all of our costs for that. I think in particular where we are with Cardano, right? Like we started on Cardano because we are, big fans of Haskell and Rust. And specifically at the time when we started, it was before Ethereum had switched to proof of stake. And so knowing that a lot of media that is out there and sold, right, especially in the publishing side, like we started in the book side because we had all those relationships, and even from the beginning, like we'd outlined that we wanted to have this decentralized DRM like apply to all media types. But on the book side, it was easier just because the text file working with it and those relationships. And when you get into the publishing side, you find that primarily what really sells in publishing a lot, like 70% of all sales, it's tons of romance content, right? There's just a massive market for romance books, audiobooks, They even do stuff where they create physical covers and tradability and collectability. But those price points are smaller, right? So if you're dealing with a price point that's around $10, well, I can't pay, you know, $85 for Ethereum gas fee to move a $10 thing. And at the time conceptually, right, in the NFT space, it was like, you know, wind moon, right? I want to buy something for $10 and I want it to be worth 1,000 the next day. And for us, it was like, well, we know that at scale, when we're talking about, you know, billions of people that consume media, they're never going to care about blockchain side, that it needs to be relatively inexpensive to move this piece of media from one person to the next. And so that was really the only option for us was Cardano. And I think the deeper we've gotten with IOG and the Cardano Foundation and some of the stuff we're working with them and discussion on is like how we can really take advantage of them being participatory and helping us create certain parts of the infrastructure to support what we're wanting to do at grand scale for media, right? I think in terms of, you know, Bitcoin is obviously like, you know, the gold standard kind of store of value in crypto. Ethereum, you know, obviously was super early to the game. It contains like a tremendous amount of DeFi, and you know that's continuing to grow as well, and just the EVM side in general. And so, you know, part of it, I come back to, you know, kind of your question about what does blockchain do? What do they sell? That is an issue, right? I think what Cardano is doing with the, you know, what Charles is doing on the governance side, I think of it kind of these three sort of overlapping circles, right? Of like, we need a really great currency, which we have that in ADA, and economics, and we need, you know, really great governing structure. And I think this is just general society, right? Like we need a strong government currency. We need a good government to regulate that currency and that activity. But you really need like the economy of like, what are the goods and services and products that are selling that are creating the churn, so that there's a purpose for the currency, and then, you know, the governance has something to regulate against. And so I think all those three in balance, I think that Cardano is moving down a path that makes a lot of sense for us, where we want to see Cardano as, you know, portrayed as the media chain, right, for all media assets, regardless of what they are, and really be the creator friendly, you know, the creator economy based chain for that. And like, you know, ETH can have the DeFi side, Bitcoin can have the, you know, store value, but we need to have a chain to support all, not just, you know, our digital currency, but all of our digital assets. Like, where do we put all those? Because even just personally, right, even outside of the creator side, you know, if my iCloud account gets hacked and I lose my iPhone, like I'm screwed, right? Or if I just get blacklisted from, you know, Google because I tweeted something they didn't like for whatever reason, like all of my personal media, myself, all of my documents, all of my photos, my movies I shot of my kids, all of that should be decentralized as well. Like we should live in a world where all that's protected.
I mean, you run risk of being deplatformed because some centralized entity controls the content. Now,
yes.
I mean, what do you do to empower the community to take ownership of the content? I mean, what do you as Book.io, Stuff.io do to kind of get that across to people? You know, ownership is good, right? Real ownership is good. How do you get the message across?
I think, you know, it's a good question, and it's something we talk about a lot internally, because I think the concept of ownership for a crypto native makes a lot of sense, right? Because we've gone down that path, and we understand like the danger of like centralization and like what true ownership and, you know, being my own bank, what that means. I think in the media side, because what we're really targeting are, you know, like I said, like these, you know, billions of users, not just the, you know, the crypto audience, is the feature set that ownership provides, right? So the ability to add features where, hey, you know, and this happens all the time, right? Where it's like, why can't I just, you know, I'm talking to somebody, I'm having coffee, I've got a book on my Audible, and I'm like, man, I wish I could give that to them, and I can't, right? So the feature set of the ability to lend stuff out or to give things away, and what really shifts that, I think, is that when we move from this commodity mindset to something we've launched, and we have it on production live, but we have it disabled for everybody to see right now because we're still testing a few things. But is the value, right? So when I can log in and see my library, and every asset has an individual value, and then I can see the sum total value of it, it changes in my mind from a pure consumption mentality to, oh, this is actually like a portfolio of micro investments of all of these assets, and all of them have unique values. And I think, as we as those feature sets become more prominent, and we're doing a lot of stuff too, where we're focused on how do we onboard these mass people, right? So like we built a promotional system where we have, a lot of different ways we can give books or assets out, and you can just redeem a code like you would like a Starbucks gift card. And then we built a system too where a new user could just log in and create an account with their email address, or log in through a social account, and we generate a wallet in the background. So they don't have to write a seed phrase down. They don't have to know anything about crypto. They can buy assets with a credit card. And so when we plug all those pieces together, and combined with the creator's sort of social side, then we get to a state where we can say, if you're, an up and coming artist, and maybe you only have 10,000 followers on your Instagram, you could point your audience here. They don't have to know anything about crypto. They can come and they can buy your album. They can listen to it on their, on our mobile apps or wherever. They can share that with other friends. They can collect it and really get past, any encumbrance that where we being in the blockchain industry get excited about. But the same way that my wife doesn't care that Netflix is sitting on AWS, right? Like it's ridiculous. It's kind of like nonsense to the mass consumer, right? So how do we get past that?
Absolutely. I always I always kind of laugh at that whole mindset that everybody that is going to use blockchain needs to know everything about blockchain, especially stuff under the hood. It's like, no, they don't. They absolutely do not need to know what's under the hood. They just need to know how to use it to do their everyday business. That's how you get mainstream adoption. Now, we have a question actually from the audience. And so the question is, when and this relates to what you were saying about monetization, when will the API be finished so digital stores can utilize the technology?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So we actually just had a meeting last week with a store in particular that they do something pretty interesting. They use AI to they're working in more on the physical side, but what we're looking at doing with them is creating an API that would do exactly this component. And what the AI does is it's basically a smarter real-time shopping cart for uh, news sites, right? So specifically, like a lot of it happens on the sports side too. So if you're reading some some article, and it's about LeBron James or something, and then all of a sudden I can buy a collector edition of his jersey, right? Because they're scraping the content, and they're then identifying and pairing that up with actual something that's like super targeted, super relevant to that particular article. And so we're kind of in discussions with them right now about an API endpoint. So I mean, a lot of it is like our roadmap is quite exhaustive and continually growing, and so it's more just resource allocation of how fast we can get to that. I think the other side of that too is like one thing that I'm very fixated on, and we've had some conversations about internally just recently, is like the decentralization of the actual like fulfillment side too, right? So because there's a couple components. There's the decentralization of the actual fulfillment component, and then that would allow anybody to create to ingest that, create any type of their own reading or watching or listening experience. But then the other side of that too is what we're moving down is which we have now internally, a portal that our business team is using to create stuff, but getting to a point where we can expose that publicly, where we effectively become almost like a decentralized YouTube meets Etsy, right? Where anybody could create any type of asset and they could sell that asset, and then it doesn't really involve us at all. And so moving down this path of like completely decentralizing all of that, so that nobody can effectively control what content is created or what content is sold, or who gets access and who could prevent people, like preventing the idea of people stopping people from accessing content they own.
So, Okay, so we spoke a little bit about just kind of covering communities, these decentralized communities like Cardano, but you've also branched out to other chains. And so tell us a little bit about how that's been going. I mean, what challenges have you seen? What added value have you seen? Just kind of give us a little bit of some insight.
Yeah, so probably a couple answers there. So I think very much believe in sort of what Charles had said early on about an internet of blockchains in the future. And so just the last Evo company that we worked with, we had right around 200,000 different publishers and imprints that we worked with, and they all have their own kind of unique set of needs or reasons why they want to do a particular thing. So even when we started the project in Cardano, we knew we were going to be a multi-chain project. Although at that time, like there were very few, if any, really projects that were wanting to say they were multi-chain because everything was so tribal. So we had a lot of discussions internally about, hey, we're going to open this up and do. I think we did Ethereum was our second chain, and we had a lot of internal debate about, hey, are we going to screw ourselves here because we're seem like we're siding with the enemy. And my philosophy has always been, I think there's pros and cons to all of these chains, and so you know, Cardano is not the fastest chain, right? There's definitely other chains that settle faster, but then those chains that settle faster are also not as decentralized. So I think an individual, what we're trying to create is not to adopt every single chain, but to say, okay, we're going to take a certain set of those, and right now we're since kind of last spring, actually, earlier conversations, and now with everything happening with the Bitcoin side, like we've been going down the path of deploying Bitcoin. So I think individual chains have different purposes for a creator or for a particular asset, right? So if we were to say, hey, we want to do 10 of some new Wu Tang album, maybe it is super collectible. Maybe it does make sense to put it on Ethereum because the liquidity in that market will support very high end, multi-million dollar collectibles, and there's only 10 of these things. Versus if we said, hey, we want to do, a giveaway of a music video for, Snoop Dogg or something. Maybe we want to do that on Algorand because the transaction cost is so low that we could put billboards up or, take out, digital ads everywhere and give those away. And then we're not suffering the same, logistic costs that we would see if we put it on like a Cardano or something, right? So I think there's different reasons for all of these. So what we do typically is like walk through that with creators, and a lot of times like we are pushing them to Cardano because we think it's superior chain, and from a technical standpoint, I think there's outside of that too, kind of the other side of it is the other communities are much more I'd say disparate or disjointed. So like Cardano, I feel like does have like one of the strongest communities, and so we've deployed to Ethereum, to Polygon, to Base, Algorand, and Cardano. So we're on 5 chains right now. So of all of those, I think when people make it to Cardano and they really understand and they stop, looking at the FUD and they really look at the technicals and what's really happening. And I think what's happening on the Bitcoin side too with Cardano is going to open a lot of those eyes to it. Is that there was so much negativity around Cardano's a ghost chain and obviously all that kind of nonsense, and like nobody really taking it serious because nobody. I don't know. I feel like a lot of kind of retail investors can be lazy, right? And it's like I'm very analytical, so I get in deep, and a lot of the investments I've made in Cardano over the last 7 or 8 years have been based on like I read the white paper. I'm trying to really understand the fundamentals, like who's behind that, like what have they done in the past, like is what they're doing, is it actually making sense? Is it really fulfilling some actual problem, or is it just some made up thing? And I think a lot of times what happens is this tribalism of just everybody on Solana saying that Cardano is garbage and not actually ever looking at it. And equally, I think sometimes in Cardano we can be guilty of that too, right? Like the stuff that's happening in Base is great. Like there's a lot of great stuff happening there. I think that it has it can fulfill a need, and there's pros and cons to all of them. So I think we'll probably expand to a few more, but we want to ultimately when we get to that open portal, then we could say, hey, anybody that wants to create any type of asset, they can deploy it to any chain they want. If they don't, if they're just a regular creator and they don't understand that or know, then we can help them by what they're wanting to accomplish. Just say put it on this chain or that chain, or just they wouldn't even have to know. We just deploy it to the chain that makes the most sense.
Yeah, I think, if you're gonna think about it, and I gave it a lot of thought because we also are, with Palmyra, we are multi-chain. We're doing stuff on Cardano and Ergo, on CKB as well. So we're not just like money chain.
Yep.
And I don't think the big question is if you're gonna do it. The big question here is how and why.
Yep.
Right. How are you going multi-chain and why are you going multi-chain?
Yep.
And I think that actually the Cardano community is very accepting to projects that are, that have real good reasons, how they do it and why they do it. And I really think that a lot of this, a lot of the negativity comes from some projects just saying they're going multi-chain, but really they just go somewhere else.
Yep.
And this is after getting funding on Cardano, getting community support on Cardano, kind of coming up on Cardano. They get poached somewhere else, and then they just get swooped away, get a little bit of money thrown at them, and they just kind of become that's basically the same concept of being shelved. That's they throw some money at you, they shelve your script. It's like, yeah, go be well. You made your $20,000. Good job. Write another one. But that thing never sees the light of day. I mean, you wrote that thing because you wanted it to be a movie. You wanted to see it, right? You wanted to see it. You want people to enjoy it. You want people to be moved by it, to be affected by it. And it's just never going to happen because that thing is going to be on a shelf forever until it turns to dust. And that's just not, that just really kind of disgusting to do to,
sad.
and sad to a creative environment. And so, but we only have a few minutes left. And within those few minutes, I would really like for you to kind of lay out, the 5-year plan. What or not the 10-year plan, the 50-year plan. What are you looking? What is your ultimate goal? Right? Where are you looking to take this? What are you looking to achieve with what you're doing right now? And you can take it any way you want. You might want to talk about, as far as where you want to take your business, or the kind of effect that you want to have on the industry, or on the world in general. I mean, my thinking has always been, especially in this, that with one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about the blockchain movement is real world impact, RWI. And I talk about this quite a bit on socials, and I truly believe in this. I think that we have a really big opportunity to have RWI if and which will create prosperity for us as businesses, because that's the beauty of this thing, right? That's the beauty of what we're doing. You can do that. Before you couldn't do that. Not really. It was super hard to do it. Now you can do it. So what is it that you want to accomplish? Where are you going with this? What is going to be your RWI?
No, I totally agree with you. I think that RWI makes me think of RWA too, right? Real world assets, and like a lot of times, what I think before we get to a real world asset state of I buy a house and it's on the blockchain, or my car loan's on there, or I own some physical thing that's tied to a blockchain. Before mass consumers really get there, what I think is like a RWDA, right? Like a real world digital asset, right? All these digital assets that everybody's currently is already buying. And I think when this law goes into effect in California, a lot of people are going to realize they're not really buying them. And so I think long term, whether that's us or a combination of other entities or some other entity, um, like the inevitability in my mind of digital assets all moving away from licensing and existing as digital objects is only more beneficial to both the creators who are making those assets and the consumers who are buying and consuming them. So really, the only person that effectively you could say would lose out in a sense would be the centralized parties that are selling them, and they're not really losing out because they would be creating a stronger tie between the creator and the consumer. So I think if we rewound in history and we went back to 1999 and blockchain came out then, that we never would have, industries never would have gone down a path of licensing. Like, it would have only made sense to say, hey, I can create a finite amount of these, they're trackable, nobody can pirate them or steal them, and every time they move we get paid in the future. And by the way, we can also see anonymously by wallets who owns those. So if we want to give them, a coupon for the next thing, or if they own that first one, they get a discount on the next one. It is a much better mousetrap. And I think long term, like, that happens, whether that's with us or with somebody else. And, like, obviously I'm biased towards us. I think we're, way out in front of this. I think we've made, we're in negotiations with a ton of some of the world's largest publishers, some of the world's largest labels, talking to movie studios. I think that there's a massive, the more we talk to those entities as well, the more feedback we get from them, which they're desperate to get out of the current situation, like any possible way that they can monetize, even with, like, Universal, like you mentioned, going to Universal, right? Labels like that, right, where they're, you would think they're making a ton of money, but they're really not making that much, and they're, you see this across the board with labels where they're cutting budgets for music videos, because music videos intent originally was basically a video advertisement, so people would go buy the album.
Yeah,
And
what
now that
music
you can't,
videos?
yeah, now you can't do that. It's like, well, why would we waste money making a music video, right? But me as a fan, I'm like, well, I would buy the music video if you gave me the option to, like, buy it and collect it. And maybe if I got it, maybe if I bought the music video a week later, I get an unreleased single, airdrop to me. Like, there's so many cool, like, combinations. I think from the merchandising side and that creator consumer, direct connection side, is inevitable to happen. So I just think, long term, like, we have massive plans to really move down that path and empower creators and empower consumers, and create this decentralized YouTube meets Etsy type of platform, so that anybody could sell anything to anybody they want, and nobody can stop or prevent any of that. I think, just somewhat in the future too, which we don't talk about our token necessarily a lot, but I in recent weeks, like, we've had a lot of discussions about how, that will play like a instrumental part just in the economy of this, and a lot of different ways of how that interacts across. I think a lot of times the token will have sort of a single purpose utility, and in our white paper we lay out, like, a lot of different ways. But I think as we've gone on these discussions, we've unlocked and realized a lot of other ways that's actually going to be highly valuable from a tokenized economy. And I think that principle in general, I think, applies not just to what we're doing, but to other projects, where an L1 token in general is there to help facilitate and should be sustainable for the resources necessary to sustain that system. But they're basically the shipper, right? They're the logistics system for all these other systems that sit on top, where the tokens from these other assets will have a more customer facing side, right? Not that, the deeper people go into it, they won't understand and realize, like, hey, I want to buy ADA, I want to buy Poly or whatever. But the more that those are focused on the customer presentation side and making that very easy for people to understand, it becomes a great mechanism. I'd say they're not really L2s, but projects, dApps sitting on top of there. It's making a lot more sense as far as, like, what we're doing and that path that we're going down. And I think we're headed towards, at least what we're doing, I think we're really headed towards this idea of, this very bright, like, resurgence of a golden era for creators that hasn't existed really since the 90s, where they can actually monetize their art and not have to make an album and put it to Spotify and get paid pennies for it, but to actually produce something, to sell a film. And I think part of that too is, like, I think we're going to move into an era where creators, like you mentioned in the beginning with David Duchovny, like, he's in a band, he wrote a book, like, he does acting, he's doing a new series right now. People that are creative have been boxed into these silos where it's like, well, if you're a musician, then you can never act, right? And if you're an actor, then, like, how dare you write a book? You're an idiot. You can't write a book. And I disagree with that fundamentally, just because I am a creator, and I've created, I've written songs and I've done art and I've done all kinds of stuff. And I think that, you know, creative people want to use different channels to create, and if they have a fan base who want to support them and buy that, then they should be free to create whatever they want, and we shouldn't be boxed into these vertical silos that sort of emerged over the last like 75 years and have basically like, you know, cut creators off from participating in these other formats. So I see this big convergence of creators being able to produce and create more stuff of the things that they like that are interesting to them. And maybe what that means too, right, long term is, hey, instead of having, you know, 100 million, a million followers, maybe of that I really only have, you know, 100,000 of them are actual true fans that really want to support me. But what I make from those 100,000 real supporters, which are basically my artistic patrons who love my work and want to support it, I'm going to make way more money on them than I am on the hundreds of millions of people that follow me on social media that I get nothing, you know, nothing from. Right? There's a lot of, you know, people just. I think when you go down that social scale towards, you know, just kind of passive, you know, listener or audience, and you moved, and that's to me is streaming and discovery, and that's good for finding new stuff. But as you go down that fan cycle of, hey, I like them, hey, I've added them to a playlist, hey, I've gone to one of their shows, hey, I've bought some of their merchandise, I am a super fan, and I want to support this artist. And maybe that's, you know, a 1-to-10 kind of ratio from the top line, but it's going to create a different environment where, hey, now, you know, I want rock stars to be rock stars, I want them to make money, I want them to do crazy stuff and create awesome music, and I want, you know, filmmakers to be empowered to create cool stuff. I want them to make cool indie films that are awesome, right? That maybe they only sell, you know, 10,000 or, you know, 20,000 units of it, and I have one, and that's super cool because like it's a cult classic now and it blows up or something. So I just feel like the future has like unlimited possibility, and blockchain is really going to be the catalyst to like radically change the whole paradigm on the digital media side.
Yeah, I think what you're really talking about there is engagement focus. And I mean, you know, even with MySpace, right? Because I remember, you know, one of the early days of MySpace, everybody just we had these bots, right? That they could go and get you friends or whatever
Yep.
they were called in MySpace. I guess there were friends, right? Friends on MySpace. Yeah.
Yep.
Anyway, yeah, you would get all these.
You're dating yourself now.
Yeah, definitely. Anyway,
Were you on Friendster?
I was briefly in Friendster, but it was just too
Yeah.
boring. So I went on MySpace, and I
Yeah.
mean, listen, you want me to date myself? I was on CompuServe
Nice.
and Prodigy, and you know,
Wow.
and BBSs. So yeah, I can date
Oh yeah.
myself all day
Yep.
long.
Yep.
But yeah, Dan is old.
I'll send you
Whose name
my ICQ number later.
Oh yeah, you still have that? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'll send you my Usenet ID later. I send you my newsgroups ID later. Yes, ICQ. Jeez, man. God, that thing.
That was you know, that was a government project. I worked with one of the guys that his ICQ number was 5.
Yeah. Well, it was DARPA, right? It's
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah, DARPA came up with ICQ. Yeah, it was crazy. Yeah, you know, but getting back to what I was saying, I mean, it's all about engagement focus, right? So, with the studios, I mean, what did they bring to you? They brought to you engagement focus, right? So they had
Yeah.
a outlets, right? They had these outlets, and all it was just a game of numbers for them. It's like, okay, you fit into this bucket, and so this is what we can do in this bucket and connect them to this, and this, and this, and this. And that's how we just basically siphon the value, right? But when you have somebody, you know, when you were saying, you know, artists that are branching out, reminded me of that, you know, that part of Zoolander, you know, where Fabio came out and said he got the Slashy Award. You know,
Yeah.
you know, this shows me that you recognize me as the best actor slash model.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing, you know. Am I going to be
Absolutely.
a slash something, you know, because slash something's back 25 years ago was a no in the industry. It's like, no, that's too complicated. You're going to be, I mean, sometimes we're like a musician and an actor. Okay, it's like a Will Smith type, right?
Maybe.
And not really at the same time, sort of at the same time, but if you think about it, you know, even somebody like Will Smith, they were, you know, they were making, you know, they were rapping first. Then they
Yeah.
went into acting. They were still he was still rapping, but he was kind of making records to promote his
Yeah.
movies, right?
Totally.
Because a lot of it was for promoting those movies. So it wasn't even like independent. But with this technology, you can make it independent because you can, like I said, you got these different focus groups. That's like, okay, well, this focus group right here, this focused audience is here for my music.
Yep.
Right. So they know me as a musician. This group knows me as a filmmaker. This group right here, they kind of like everything, right? This group right here, well, they are, they're abstract. So they like I don't know, like my sewing or something. And you can do
Yep.
that because the reach, the access is so wide.
Yep.
And I just think it's super exciting. I think it's super exciting because I'm a creative person and I did go through my phase of discovery, of creativity, of euphoria from creativity, then from disappointment of how difficult it is to truly be creative and just deliver. It wasn't
Yeah.
even about like if people like my stuff or not. It was about how many people actually get to see it because it is so damn difficult. I
Yeah.
used to do stand-up comedy like 25, 26
No, that's
years ago.
awesome. Yeah.
And this, but it's brutal. It is a brutal
Yeah.
field. It is a brutal
Do
field
you have any?
because
Do you have any anything on film? We gotta sell
uh,
that. That'd be fun.
probably like from way back. I got to look for it,
I'd
but
love to see that.
it's brutal because really the only real way to get into it is open mics, right? So you
Yep.
can always go and
Yeah.
find a bunch of open mic
Yep.
comedy open mics, but the problem with that is that open mics are pretty much all comedians, and
Yeah.
comedians are the worst possible audience you can get to gauge your material because they won't it's highly competitive, so they won't
Yeah.
laugh if it sucks. They won't laugh. They'll ridicule you. Oh man, that's terrible. Get off the stage. And if it's really good, they won't laugh because they're going to be pissed off, saying, "Oh man, this guy's got one over me. This guy
Yep.
is, this guy is, he's got good stuff. So screw this guy. I can do better than this
Yep.
guy." So it's never like a dishonest reaction, and really have to get through that, and you have to put the hours in. You have to stand up there and just really take shit from these guys and really be able
Yeah.
to understand what that reaction means, what this reaction means, what's funny, what's not funny, what is your thing, what is your niche as a comedian. It's super difficult, and
Yeah.
and in the end, most of these guys just don't make it because you don't get an honest reaction. You don't know,
Yeah.
yes, this is funny. Yes, it is funny. And these guys are just assholes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
really is good stuff. And that's why, like I
Uh,
said, I'm excited about what you do because you give creators this way of just kind of putting things out there, and if they suck, they suck. I mean, it's
yep.
okay, but at least they know they've been given a fair chance to
Yep.
suck.
Yeah. The free market can make that decision for them.
Exactly, is the free
Yeah.
market. And like I said, if you suck, you suck. You got to get over that. But you don't want to be the guy who was suffocated by the industry just because it is this juggernaut of like opaqueness and disgustiveness,
Yeah.
you know
Absolutely. Yeah.
and you don't want to be that. So like I said, I really like, I get it now. I get now what you're doing. I really like it. I really can appreciate it as a consumer and as somebody who attempted to be in this, in the creative space, and know how painful it is, knowing how it's already a big thing to put yourself out there, and it's even worse that when you do get the courage to put yourself out there, you're still getting beaten down, you're still getting just suffocated by all these people. It's great to have something like Book.io, like Stuff.io out there that really gives you that chance to suck or not to suck, but in a fair way, right?
Yeah. Very much. Very much. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think on the
So
consumer side too, it's like you know, I think there's that for the creator on the free market side. I think on the consumer side, it's also the moving out of all these models of advertising, right? Like I'm so sick of listening to podcasts and having to listen to, I pay for a subscription and then I still have to listen to ads. And it's like, I would be much happier to just buy an
yeah.
episode and not be interrupted,
Tell me
you
how
know?
much it costs for you to shut up. Just tell me. Okay,
Yeah.
just shut up this crap. I want to listen to like it. Yeah.
Yep.
Anyway, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
Uh, Joshua. Sorry, I keep calling you Josh because I'm
No, you're
lazy.
fine.
Joshua.
Either
Yeah.
one.
J Dog. Um, anyway, it was great to have you on. We should definitely do this again. Again, love what you're doing. Get what you're doing. And I really hope that the rest of the community also really gets what you're doing, because it's this like multi-level thing, right? And it's great on so many levels for the content creator, for the consumer, for the industry, for the technology, for the mission. It's great. So yeah, like I said, guys, check out stuff.io, visit their socials. I'm sure Josh, if you knock on his door, is gonna make you a nice cup of coffee. Do that,
That's right.
or maybe not. You do
That's
live in
right.
Texas, right? So yeah,
I
just
do.
like yeah. Anyway, you get what I'm trying to say. Check these guys out if you haven't already, because you probably have already if you're watching this, because you guys are Cardano guys, and if you're not Cardano guys, check it out. Check out what they're doing. Josh, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for
And
having me. Appreciate it.
yeah, great stuff. Great stuff. All right, guys, listen. Unfortunately, I have to wrap this up. We went a little bit over, but I'm happy about it. I'm happy to have been able to talk these great things. These things are really close to my heart. And you know what? We will be doing this again next week. Now, Josh is not going to be here, but we're going to have somebody else that also is really cool and is going to give us some really cool stuff. And anyway, you get it, right? So, listen. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you very much for tuning in. And it's about that time. So same next week, same time, same channel, same place on the interwebs. And until then, this is Dan coming to you live from Japan with my friend Josh Stone, signing off.